Hello, hello, hello. How is everybody? Hot, yes. Get a drink, sit down though, please, because we're going to get started. As you can imagine, we have a lot of very busy and important people on this panel, so people have places to be, and we want to make sure we give you what you came for. My name is Rashawn Lindsay, and I am the president and CEO of MoviePhone. Yeah, that one. Hello, and welcome to MoviePhone. You guys remember that? And that's pretty good, right? I feel like
that was very good.
I'm trying to convince Cleveland to let me be the new voice, but he's not buying it yet.
That was very good. You took me back like date night, circa 19.
I like it.
Date night.
We have an esteemed panel here, including business owners, and lots of people who have been in the business for a long time. So Marissa Nance of Native Tongues, founder and CEO. Cleveland O'Neill, who is the CEO of MoviePhone Media, as well as Connection 3 Entertainment. And Madupe Coggleton, who is an independent consultant, but was most recently with Amazon. And Jean-René Zetrin. I can practice my French accent when I do that.
That was good.
Merci beaucoup. Who is with a UTA, but also has been on our side of the business at Ogilvy and is really steeped in talent. So we're going to get started, and hopefully you guys get a lot out of this. It's really the shifting the paradigm, really thinking about what it means to, in Cleveland's case, to acquire a business and remake it. In Marissa's case, to start a business which is really different from what she had spent most of her career doing. In Madupe's case, is going into large organizations and trying to help them rework and reframe the way they think about talent, D&I, et cetera. And for Jean-René, he probably has a little bit of all of that, but specifically working at a talent agency, so upfront talent, but working internally and supporting talent in that way. So, and he's done that both at Ogilvy and he's doing it at UTA now. So I'm actually going to start with Marissa, since she's next to me.
Oh, my.
Why not?
All right.
Marissa,
I got here last, but I'm going to go first.
You ready? But she's already also been on a panel, so she's warmed up a little bit.
I'm warmed up.
So,
I'm ready to go.
And then she fought the traffic to get
on.
here. So Marissa, you spent most of your career at a very large agency and a part of the Omnicom group, and then you decided to start your own outfit and have been doing that. And really, I think it's fair to say, really much more deeply ingrained with your clients and their mission. I'd love to understand, sort of how you went about starting your agency, and then what is it that you're doing that's different than what you were doing at the large agency?
Yeah. I spent 2 to 3 decades almost, starting when I was about 5 years old.
Like us all.
At an unnamed holding company. We're going to do the unnamed thing right now, but if you give me a glass of rosé on the stage, I'll start naming.
Can we get a glass of rosé?
Can we get the glass of rosé? And I did those decades, and at the end of that career, I put together a business plan, and I did that because I was what a lot of people called an intrapreneur. I was creating new business revenue internally for the company. I wasn't an entrepreneur creating revenue and equity and ownership for myself. I was an intrapreneur creating it for the company I worked for. And I said, there's got to be ways for both of us to benefit. If I launch my own agency, if I keep the majority of the equity and ownership, making it minority certified with you having a piece of it, we'll all win. And it felt like a good idea, maybe foolish. Maybe I should not have said we'll all win, because I thought foolishly that was a good thing to say, but some people don't like those scales to be balanced. And I think we all know what I mean when I say that. We don't like those scales to be balanced. And so as I was leaving to launch my agency with them, shortly before launch, 2 weeks before launch, they pulled out. And I was left high and dry. And I really had to think about a quick pivot in, do I still want to do this? Am I going to do this? What will I do? And 5 years later, I still get a little emotional because I went to every single client I worked with at that large holding company, and I said, listen, this is what's happened. It's no longer going to be me partnered with them. It's just going to be me on my own. I'd love for you to still come and partner. And every single client came. Wow. Every single client. And thank you. And with that came another shift and pivot in the mindset of the holding company. You know, suddenly it was, oh, wait, you thought we said, no, what we really had done said was, no. We heard what you said. And so now I'm in a position where 5 years later, Native Tongue Communications is the first and only minority female media agency to exist. Bravo. We're 5 years in. We have our client base still proudly, and it is 100% owned by me versus a portion of it owned by me. So that's really the journey I had to go through. And I guess the lesson learned is it's not always fun, it's not always easy, but it's a journey, and you'll get to the end of it.
Rosé. The rosé's coming.
We need 3 more.
Get them all up here.
Thank you. First of all, I think congratulations are in order just for what you went through to get to this point. And obviously, I didn't say it in the beginning, but obviously feel free to give a little background on yourself before you answer the questions. And we're going to definitely come back to you, Marissa. I'm just going to move down the line. Why not make it easier? Cleveland, we'll go to you next. As the person who's now acquired about 4 years ago a very well-known brand, what is your approach to sort of remaking and rebranding the company? And what do you see sort of as the future of Moviefone?
Well, I like the discussion about a pivot, and of course our panel is about pivoting. And so in our particular case, we had created and developed and produced and distributed the 19th season of a nationally syndicated TV series called Made in Hollywood. What we didn't have was a digital component. And so everyone was saying, well, you guys could just do a startup. And I thought, that's not going to work. I mean, there is no way we could get the traction we needed. And so I put an M&A team together, went out in the marketplace, and was very fortunate that I was tracking Moviefone for a very long time. And many of us may remember that AOL acquired it for $400 million. And I remember thinking then, wow, and I was so proud of what those entrepreneurs had done, selling their company at the start of, what became the difference in the digital landscape. So as it went on, it eventually got sold by Verizon AOL for a lot less than $400 million. It was $23 million, and I thought, ooh, now I have it's getting closer. It's getting closer. So bottom line is, we were able to eventually acquire it, and I know that M&A is very much like Vegas. Oftentimes, it costs a fortune, obviously. Your legal fees cost a fortune, and you could leave with nothing. So we're very fortunate to have acquired it. But for us, it's really creating a 360-degree ecosystem. We already had the TV and the video side of movies, and we had a dedicated fan base there. What we want to do is create a all-inclusive one-stop for how and why movies are made, behind-the-screen content, tickets, where to watch, and find it, watch it, and behind the screen. And that's now what we have. Moviefone.com is in outstanding shape. It's amazing that it has millions of users around the world and here in the US. And of course, it's an iconic brand. So when we talk about pivoting, it's so interesting that in the old days, Moviefone meant, welcome to Moviefone. Well, today, we do everything on our phones. So it's still very much Moviefone.
Oh, and shameless plug, we're launching our app in the fall, relaunching our app in the fall. Shameless plug.
No such thing as a shameless plug. We are a can, we are Melanan, plug away.
All right, so we're going to move on to Modupe. And unfortunately, this is a tough question, and I hate having to ask it, but I feel like you are very well equipped to answer it. And it's really looking, in particular, at your skill set and your experience and the work you've done, which has been deeply ingrained in large companies like Amazon and Cisco around DEI. And now looking at the backlash that we have been experiencing across both our industry as well as many other industries and some of the outspoken folks, including people who own large social media platforms that will remain nameless. I'll take Marissa's suggestion and keep them nameless for now. We'll see if I stay that way. But I'd love to kind of understand from your perspective, what do you think the future of work is when that's the kind of thing we're fighting against? And when you've done all the work you've done and have obviously made some progress, but clearly we're dealing with something that is going back in the other direction.
Yeah, so first let me just say I'm so inspired. And Marissa, thank you for sharing what you shared about your story, because I think that that's one of the reasons why I made the decision to start my own consulting firm, is because that pivot is real. When you're sitting in spaces and you're building, revolutionary works and you're giving it away, and then you begin to think to yourself, I should probably be doing this on my own so that I can benefit and continue to lean into the legacy for my family. So I just want to say thank you for that. The second thing I'll say is that it 100% is affecting not only this particular industry specifically, but every industry. I had the honor and privilege of leading one of the largest DEI teams in the world, probably. My team was in 14 different countries, several hundred people reporting to me, and across 14 different business lines. So whether it's fashion, books, Kindle, global operations, et cetera. And when you think about the intersection of not only the talent that exists in those spaces, but the organizations that are actually doing the work in the communities, where it's being affected is the budgets are being slashed, the scrutiny is there, the questioning, as I often heard this word called of, well, why do we need to invest there? Before, there was a lot of work that really focused on it was the right thing to do. It's no longer about the right thing to do. Now, people may tell you all that it still is about the right thing to do, and we're committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion, or whatever acronym you want to use. But the reality of it is when the rooms get smaller and smaller, and it's, the C-suite level executives in the room, and the decisions are already made, most times by the time it gets to the chief HR officer or some of those other individuals on their teams who are operationalizing the DEI strategies, the budgets have been cut, right? And so now you have to try and figure out how you're going to continue to do the more with significantly less. And having to be on the other side of that table of constantly telling people, unfortunately, no, we can't. Our strategies are moving more inward. And we know the value add of organizations and what they bring to the table, but if we can't get the budget to truly make the difference, that's where it starts to affect us. And then I'll tell you personally, as an individual, it's something that's harder for us, I think, when you're a Black person in corporate America. When you sit on the space of being able to partner with people and you see the light because you've been able to support organizations with $10,000 and supporting a small business goes a long way, right? A small community organization.
Say that again.
Exactly. $10,000 goes a long way from big corporate to small business. And when you have been able to do that for 3, 4, 5 years, and now that 10,000 is maybe now 2,500, and you know what that's going to do to what they can offer their customers and their employees, it starts to hurt you a bit differently, but it also hurts your brand. And so making the decision to pivot in a space where you can consult and advise those individuals on, okay, let's talk about your strategy. Reach and impressions is not going to be the differentiated value when you get ready and say, hey, please support my organization. Let's talk about the company, what's the value prop for them, and then how do you build that into your new strategy moving forward. I do think that although a lot of that may have sounded pretty negative, I think the positive side of it is it's a new day for us, many of us, to level up how we think about strategy, how we think about creating inclusive products, as well as in creating inclusive environments for our employees, and then being able to connect the dots between what we build for our employees who are also our customers it definitely is going to have a positive impact on the products and services we build and create for our customers.
I love that. And
Can
it's oh, do you want to say something?
I was going to ask, can I ask a question? We have
Absolutely.
a brilliant strategist, and we are in the throes of a war. I mean, this is literally warfare, and minefields are going off. How do you, or how would you suggest we deal with the lack of accountability and ramifications? And it's sad that we're not talking about the lowering of standards and ethics and morals. We're now clear it's warfare. There's no accountability because there are no ramifications. There was a moment when, if I don't do this, even if I don't want to, I won't get my bonus. I won't get to hire another person. I'm going to hear about it in my review. Now there's no ramifications, and that removes the accountability. Any thoughts to give us on that? Anyone, but I want to start there. Well,
I mean, look, I think on the accountability side, all too often, in my experiences, I've often seen companies where if the clients are demanding it, the organization will make sure that those adjustments are made. And all too often, I think what we find is clients will speak to it, but not hold the companies in any way, shape, and form accountable. And it's about the bottom line at the end of the day. And I think, in my experiences, going back as far as PepsiCo, I could remember how it was critically important to make sure that that was something that was very much part of the equation. In the advertising industry, it happens with different clients. There are certain clients that expect it. They want to see what the teams look like. They want to see not what the teams look like just in the pitch form. They want to see what the teams look like after the pitch has been done and they've won the piece of business. In the talent space, in terms of the industry space, there it tends to be a little more challenging only because now you're dealing with individuals who are their own brands. So again, if they have the appetite for it and they're looking for it, then the companies will certainly step up. So I think from an accountability standpoint, it starts with the clients, honestly.
I actually think that's a great segue because, Jean-René, the next question was for you. I also want to point out, in case you two don't know it, you're both BU graduates, Cleveland and Jean-René, so you might want to vibe on that later. I also hope that everyone, tries to meet everyone here. Obviously, we have entrepreneurs who have businesses. Some of you have work that you can give some of these entrepreneurs, and I think that's important that we think about how do we build together. But, I'm going to ask this question from sort of both sides of the talent equation, right? So, yes, you said the talent can be brands in and of themselves, and obviously that gives them a lot of power. But then internally, that talent is also important because that's partly how you attract your external talent. It's partly how you keep them. How do you manage the shifting paradigm of the power of talent, especially vis-a-vis how they work with brands and clients, but also how you work with studios and networks, et cetera, and then connecting that with the internal talent structure as well?
Fair point. Well, I'll try and answer it the best way I can. I think it's less about the changing of the power structure. I almost think it's about the evolution of the ecosystem in a way. Because if you think about it, there are certain things that will still stay the same. Those that are the creators in terms of the content, they're going to still be there. Those that are distributing are still going to be there. Those that are the exhibitors in terms of consumer services and or the channels, they're still going to be there. And obviously you have your consumers. I think when we think about the changes and the shifts that are happening in the ecosystem, I think what you're seeing in terms of shifts are three things. I think one of them is the barrier to entry is lower, and I think it's also expanding. So therefore, you're going to have a lot more in terms of creators and opportunities for them. I think technology is playing a role in that also because obviously as you get technology and you get more platforms that are increasing, it gives people more opportunity. I think the power of generative AI plays a big role in that also because now you have people who have access to creating and telling stories and there are going to be more of them. So when I think about those dynamics, I think you're looking at the number of creators are going to be increasing. I think the quality of the work as it relates to what will happen as a result of leveraging AI is going to help to influence that. So I think that's the first shift. I think the second shift also speaks to what's happening as it relates to managing complexity. Because if you think about it, there's consolidation and fragmentation that's happening at the same time in this ecosystem. You've got consolidation, like if you think about Amazon, it's a massive aggregator of content. So if you think about it, they're 10 times amount of content that they have versus a Netflix. So you're going to see a lot of consolidation. You're also going to see some fragmentation because you have a lot of niche type of entities in sports and what have you that are also playing in that space. So I think there's a shift that's happening there. And I think probably the third one is with regards to how we make money. If you think about it traditionally, you know, the monetization in our space has been always around advertising. It has also included subscriptions in terms of, you know, the direct payments. It's also included endorsements and to some degree, you know, merchandising. So at some point, you're also going to see that changing landscape. And as you think about it, monetization for creators, as you think about social and how they leverage social, is going to have some impact on that there. So I think there are a lot of things going on. And I think for companies, it's about making sure that you have the right, in our case, creators. So I think at the UTA, for example, we've got like over 800 creators that are in this space because we know that it's an opportunity for us not only to help monetize their brands, but also connect them with their clients and connect them with their consumers. So I think those are the three shifts that we're dealing with.
Well, so I have an announcement to make for everyone. He just made the panel about half as long because he answered about 5 of the questions I have.
In that case, we good.
You're welcome. Actually, I want to stay with the idea of the shifting ecosystem, and I'd love to hear from more than one of you. I see Talitha Watkins over there, calling her out, yes, because she's amazing, and she, you know, leads a very, you know, a great creative entity, and I think about both the barriers of entry and allowing more people to be creative, to show their creativity, but I also think about almost immediately, things become a question of scale, right? And sometimes I feel that we almost make the assumption that everything has to be big. But sometimes in order for it to be good, in order for it to have the effect you want it to have, it shouldn't scale but so much. And you know, working for a UTA, I'm sure they don't want to hear that. But I would love to hear from each of you in terms of how you manage that, you know, things that obviously drive revenue and maybe things that sometimes drive audience but not revenue, how you think about when you're advising clients and helping them think through those ideas, something that should be scaled versus that's something potentially that shouldn't or maybe can't. So I'd love for each of you, I know you sort of already answered it, but for the three of you to kind of opine.
Yeah, I would say that it depends on, for me in my work, it really depended on, let's say, for instance, if it's internal, the number of employees I'm working backwards from, right? If I look at how many employees do I need to impact, that's one. Is there an opportunity to impact customers? Like, what's the total customer base that I'm working backwards from? And then that's when I have to think about the percentage of what should scale versus what can remain intimate, and we don't necessarily have to have the impact tell this grand story. Working in I wish we could have done the companies that did need a name, but okay. But, you know, in my previous company, you know, I was working backwards from over 1 million, you know, employees that I had to build diversity, equity, and inclusive strategies for. And so if that's the target, then 80% of what I build has to focus on the ability to scale globally and to reach a high percentage of those employees. And so I tend to think about it through the 80-20 rule. Maybe 20% of what I'm building, my strategy, can focus on small communities or, you know, that concept of think globally but act locally. Maybe 20% of it is built on local community engagements, those types of things. But that's where I would say the scale aspect of it is critical. Because if I am building something where it's not generating revenue, right? DEI strategies, we have to try and build in the profitability aspect of it. And that's through the intersection of the brands and the intersection of the product lines, et cetera. But in order for that to happen, I have to create this engagement model where I'm bringing those brands to my diverse customers or the customers that they may not necessarily see as value, even if they don't say it out loud. But I know that they're not necessarily seeing, you know, the Marissas, me, and all of us as those individuals who are buying luxury beauty products, and they're not marketing to us. And so how do I help create that opportunity for them to come and say, no, we will buy.
But they're not looking at any of the
$500 skin
data?
cream.
Because there's data.
You know what?
I think it's 10x.
I think depending on the size of the company, especially in the DEI space, you can have access to so much data that it becomes paralyzing. And so in one of my books that I'm going to write it's not that complicated, because as we get so paralyzed by the data, literally, what are the anecdotes saying? So it has to be twofold, the data and the anecdotes. Because the data may say only 2% of this population is buying your product. But if I talk to that 2%, maybe it's 250,000 out of whatever percentage that is, right? And so I think that that's where people get lost in the data, and they have to start paying attention to the anecdotes, because that's where the story also exists.
I could not agree more. From an agency perspective, I'm gonna be a little controversial. You may kick me
Please.
off stage.
Have you had any of that rosé?
Yeah, the rosé is kicking in, and I'm gonna be a little controversial. I don't like the word multicultural. I find the word multicultural to be an insult, because we are more than the sum of, I wish to target black women 25 to 54. How dare you? The data and the insights married together weave a story that is bifurcated, that is faceted, that is us. We are not multicultural people. We are microcultural people. And you owe us the respect to dig down into those microcultural insights and information and the quantifying and the qualifying of who we are. And I believe in that so strongly, I no longer say multicultural. I say microcultural, and I own the word. I've trademarked it. So
Right.
that's what I think we need to really begin to press on and forward through, right? We are more than the sum of who they thought we were. And we can prove that through the data and through the insights. And that's why I'm in spam, because I'm putting all my money back into my trade desk, and I'm putting all my money back into the data and the analytics and the tools and the resources we have as a media agency, so we have proof positive of that fact. So I couldn't agree with you more. That's where we have to press forward. That's who we are as a people.
What are your thoughts, Cleveland? Knowing that you're not actually targeting necessarily specific audiences, but you want everybody to want to watch movies.
Well, you know, when we talk about this kind of thing, it reminds me of in the early days as we built this TV series Made in Hollywood, which led to the acquisition of Moviefone. If there wasn't a Denzel movie or a Tyler Perry movie, many of our advertiser clients would say, well, you know, there isn't an African-American movie opening. And I'd say, so you think we just sit at home and wait for an African-American movie? I mean, obviously, we go to the movies as a people. And those movies can be general market movies. There may be some that are a little more appealing than others. But, I think it's really important when we talk about the change in the landscape and how this whole, even streaming today, there's just so many opportunities in terms of talent, in terms of specific kinds of independent releases, and we see the whole gamut from our standpoint, because we'd love to find a small growing filmmaker who's an indie, who has talent, and we can track that talent, and we can go behind the screen and visit him on the set or her on the set and watch their career develop. And we've done that many times. And at the same time, we have many of our fans who want the big blockbuster. So I think it's very interesting how the prolific opportunities that are there right now, with all of the content, all of the channels for content, it's really amazing.
I appreciate that. We're gonna pivot just a little bit, and with each of you kind of, and any of you can respond or all, but thinking about, the changing landscape, thinking about innovative leadership and what that means, but also companies, especially ones that have well-known brands and traditions and some of those things that are also important. How do we think about those things in the but also balance keeping some of the cultural pillars that some of these companies have had, or and if you're consulting with clients, how they might maintain some of those things that are important, but also think more sort of expansively and more innovatively.
I think I'm going to answer this question. If not, I may have to ask you to repeat part of it again. Here's my thought is that I can appreciate companies that have, whether it's leadership principles, values, tenets, et cetera, that continue to drive the company forward. But I do think as we continue to, seek talent, attract talent, understand the generations and what the different needs are of generations, the value systems have to evolve. That's just period, point blank. If you think about what some of those leadership principles are, for example, I'll use Amazon. Before I left, Amazon had created 2 new leadership principles. And it had to do that because of the changing economy. The world was continuing to evolve. The expectations, as I said, of the generations, it's evolving. Again, back to the data, we have access to so much data that tells us how people work, why they work, how long they're staying at their jobs, why they're leaving. The mental health conversation, really has changed how companies look at their value systems. And I also think COVID actually impacted the future of work in a way that companies had to really take a step back and say, is this who we are or who we were? Is this who we're going to be tomorrow? And where we were, is it enough to support us to get there? And so I really think that there's no way to just sit on principles or value systems that you had if the company was 30 years old, 50 years old, 100 years old. It has to evolve with the talent that we're attracting because the customer needs. You talked about the various streaming platforms, et cetera, that are available. One of the previous panelists talked about the gig economy. The needs of people are changing every single day. And so people don't want to stay at work longer than 1 to 3 years nowadays, right? And so if you think about it, okay, so that 1 to 3 years, what is the experience my employees are going to have? What are my customers going to have? What experience my customers are going to have with my employees that are staying during that time? And then this is the one piece I think that people often forget, in larger companies, is everyone's a storyteller now. Social media has made everyone the storyteller. So whether you're in corporate and you go on LinkedIn to talk about your experience with an event that you did that day, or someone's disgruntled and they want to take it to LinkedIn and Twitter and everywhere else and then start to post videos, right? Leak culture. All of those things impact who the company is, who they are in that moment, and who they're going to be moving forward.
I'll agree with you certainly on the evolution. I think that is the key. I'm with an organization now that has 2,000 employees. 6 years ago, UTA was probably about 1,000 employees. And the reality is, I think what's critically important when you're part of a founder-led environment or founder-led companies are there certain things that sit within the DNA of the company. And, for us, whether it's entrepreneurship, whether it's the idea around being collaborative, whatever those components are around innovation, those things have to sit within the DNA of the organization. Because as you bring in talent organically or you make acquisitions in order to scale the organization, you have to make sure that those things are threads that you'll find in those other organizations, in the leaders and in the employees. And then the question of accountability again comes up, because the idea is, how do I ensure that what we are professing and what we are evangelizing as an organization in terms of who we are, we can see it across the other parts of the organization. So there is an evolution that has to be part of it that goes into that calculation, because at one point it was purely representing film and TV. Now we've got sports, we've got influencers, we've got a whole host of capabilities and things that we bring as part of our portfolio in service of this culture. And you have to make sure that whatever you're doing, that those components are tried and true, but that they can evolve with you in the organization, because that one leader cannot be reflected in every part of this organization. but their principles, their mindsets, and their approach can be, and that's what we have to hold them
I
accountable.
want to double down on that a second before you two answer, because I'd love to understand. I mean, this is exactly what this panel is about, right? But I'd like to know if when you see you're adding the things like the influencers in sports, if that stuff you think is happening organically or if they're being forced, because I think there's a difference between how it gets accepted both at the leadership level as well at the employee level if something feels forced. So I'd love to kind of get your thoughts.
It has to be both, because whenever you are, for example, acquiring a company, you acquire that company because of what they bring to the table, and they have their sort of cultural norms and who they are and what they're all about. Hopefully that there's already alignment from the front end side. But over time, they need to be integrated into what we're all about. So you can't force it up front. You have to make sure that it's part of it. But over time, you have to hold them to integrating themselves within the bigger portfolio, within the company. And therefore, that's why it's both. So there's part of it that allows you to give them the lane for them to do what they have to do, because you want to evolve their brand, but their brand is part of something bigger. And that's why I think it's both.
Can I would say from a tactical lens that I tell people of color all the time, younger people come to me and say advice, 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 and I say all the time, we have a lot of superpowers we don't tap into. We hide them from ourselves. And one of the superpowers that we have is that we have been forced for hundreds of years to fit in. We don't walk into rooms that are made for us. And most of us in this corporate America find ourselves, and I say this all the time, this will be my memoir, the only chip in the cookie. You be the only chip in that cookie. So when that happens, we by nature have been forced to learn how to get into a room, how to make ourselves feel seen, how to make ourselves be seen as that chip. That's a superpower. And when we're first, and it's like a superhero. Most superheroes get their superpower and they don't want it. They're unhappy. I'm mad I got bit by a spider. I can't believe I can fly now. I'm hitting buildings. You're mad you got this superpower. I want you to take a step back and embrace your superpowers, because we've been forced for these hundreds of years to fit into places where we weren't wanted and where we weren't welcomed, and we have gone above and beyond success because we figured it out. And so as the world continually evolves and changes and is fluid in scale, remember this superpower. Don't fight it. You can and will walk into a room, assess what's going on, understand who's in it, and be the best you can be.
All right, I'm gonna double down on that one again really quickly as well. I agree with everything you said, but I want to know one thing. How do we quantify it?
Tell me who's we.
The we who own the superpower. So how do we quantify our superpower?
How do I quantify
I would love to know
my
how you
own?
do it to pitch clients. I'm sure that's part of how you pitch clients. So how do you quantify that superpower and helping them both understand their customer needs, but also potentially helping them understand what their strategy should be, right? Because I'm sure it's both.
Well, so everything depends on audience. So I'm going to answer it maybe a couple of ways. If someone comes to me personally, and that's my superpower, how do I believe that? Well, now I'm strong enough after doing this however many decades, I'm not going to stay on stage, to say, I created and owned in my own blood, sweat, and tears the first and only minority female media agency to exist. We lasted through COVID. We just had our 5th anniversary, and in 5 years, we've won more awards than some agencies that have existed double our time. And we do that because I have a sense of who I am, who the people who work for me are. We have a variance of voice. We're not cookie cutter. There are not 5 Marissas standing behind me. There are 5 people who I know are strong and have strength and can build a foundation if I'm not there. And that takes variety, and that takes diversity, and that takes strength, because as we've just heard from this incredible panel, people don't have the strength to stand up and do that. to assign that diversity to themselves and to their company and to their work. That's how you quantify it. The awards, the ROI, the share of voice, the dollars you've brought in, that's what you show the clients.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you. You definitely answered that question. Cleveland, you don't have to answer, but if you want to answer that, the last question, the balancing.
The balancing.
Between the innovative leadership, but also cultural sort of norms and traditions.
Well, just speaking from our particular perspective, the change and the evolution overall in the movie business, our exhibitor partners, for example, they are really hurting. I mean, why? Because of the choice, because of the evolution in our business right now. And as much as we're agnostic, obviously, at Moviefone, we support box office, we support streaming, we support movies on any channel and option that's available. But as we take a look at these things, we just left CinemaCon. We have a big presence there. And I have to say, as much as it's a fun convention and people connect and reconnect, the real truth is most of those exhibitors would pull me to the side and say, I might have to file bankruptcy next week. I mean, and that is amazing, and that's really sad. And so it speaks from our perspective to the evolution, to the change, and how you have to balance being innovative, because that speaks to the heart of small business. Now, I will also say something that I think is very interesting. There's been almost no diversity in the exhibition industry. I mean, if we think about it, from the AMCs to the Cinemarks, and I'm not putting anyone down, I'm just saying the bottom line is most of that industry has had very little diversity, and you have to ask yourself, would that change? Could that have changed? I mean, the industry has a lot of challenges and struggles. Had they brought more diversity to the forefront, how could that have changed the exhibition industry? I think that's a really solid
also fighting
question.
change a lot of times, right? Because they thought that the VCR was going to ruin movies.
That's
they thought streaming
exactly
was
right.
Gonna ruin movies,
Yeah.
But it's really the lack of innovation in some ways.
Lack of innovation, and could diversity have brought that forward?
All right, so we're down to our last question. So I want to move us back away from ourselves, and I'd love each of you to just give an example of a company that you think is or has done a really good job of reimagining themselves from a leadership perspective, from a talent perspective, from a brand perspective, any of the above, any or all of the above. I'd love each of you to just kind of give an example of someone you think's doing it well.
I'll just use one quickly. I think Nike, for me in the diversity space, has just done a wonderful job of whether they continuously rebrand themselves. I think they're a great example of where inclusion is in the fabric. I think ultimately, as a diversity leader, the goal is to work yourself out of a job. It sounds crazy, but if you think about it, if we truly understand business strategy and we know to protect the integrity of the work, let's integrate it into our products and services, right? We shouldn't think about how we are going to have representation after we know what the data is, right? We should have it built into our attract talent strategy, right? How are we going about making sure that the talent that's in the company, what are we doing to retain the talent? So it has to be built into the employee life cycle all the way through the customer life cycle. And then the one thing I would say is that I think one reason why I think Nike has done a great job is I truly believe that people joining movements, regardless of if it's a movement that makes sense. I mean, we know of some political movements that are absolutely ridiculous, but people seem to get behind this particular person. I mean, we've seen the red hats, right? And they may not know what it's rooted in, but they get behind it. People need to be a part of something. And every time I see a Nike campaign, I know they had this campaign that was about pregnant women are athletes too. I instantly felt seen. Because I've been pregnant. I didn't see myself as an athlete, but now I'm connecting to why that makes sense. And so I think they've done a great job and have always, for me, been an example of a case study of a company that their complete through cycle is one that models inclusion.
Yeah, and they've been doing it a long time. I'll never forget If You Let Me Play, probably one of my all-time favorite commercials. Right.
I mean, first of all, shame on me if I don't plug my own company. So there it is. No, absolutely, I'll definitely plug UTA from that perspective. Look, I think of the 3 organizations that play in this space of talent, I mean, first of all, we're sitting at the nexus of media, of brand, sports, and music. So that unto itself is huge. But I like what I see in our organization, one, because I don't think we suffer from groupthink when I think about some of the other competitors in the landscape. I think there is this general view that we are the scrappy ones. We're going to come in, we're going to do it in a way that's very client-centric focused, and more importantly, we're willing to take risks. So I think one of the things that we profess when we talk about the norms in the culture around being entrepreneurial, that's something that our leaders look for people to do. So it's not just coming in and being a representative as an agent, but what are the different opportunities that you see in this landscape that are going to serve your client, and we'll put the money down and we'll back you up by doing that. And obviously, as it relates to, creating an inclusive environment, I think everyone's always dealing with that challenge, but the question becomes, when I watch the whole DE&I journey, certainly over the last few years, you could see a lot of companies were performative, perfunctory around it, cosmetic because of everything that was happening. But the question is, what are your leaders doing to make sure that they've put things in place so that the reaction isn't for this moment in time, but for the long term? And those are things that we've been putting in place. So I look at that company, I look at our company, I'm like, this is good. And then, there are companies like a PepsiCo that have been doing it for some time, that are, 40, 50,000 deep in terms of employees, but they've had a history of doing that and moving that agenda along. So I can appreciate a company like that as well.
Let's do it quickly.
Movie phone. Well, you do that really good. I'm looking at that mist from that fan. I think the panel should have it turned. How does it feel to you guys out there? That's a winner. Without naming specifically, I will just say this. I think when commitments to diversity and innovation is authentic, I think it works. And one example I can give, I'm very impressed with how Mark Pritchard at P&G, and I'm just very honest about that. He seems authentic. He speaks the speak, he walks the walk, he talks the talk, and he's very unique, unfortunately, in that regard. So if I had to pull something out of a hat, I would use him as a great example. How that can affect sales, marketing, advertising. I think, and given that their scope is one of the leading brands around the world, I think that's very impressive.
I agree. I would give 2 quickies. The first one is McDonald's clients. I'm also going to shout out Liz Campbell in the audience, who's a big part of that, really driving the culture and driving their success. So I think they're doing the do. I'm also, and that's one I think a lot of us know, another client I work with is Charlie Brown and Snoopy. So Franklin Armstrong is my client, the one lone black peanut. And when I started working with them, there was a lot of conversation around Thanksgiving and where does Franklin have a seat at the table? And how do we address that, and how do we talk about that? And if you know, you know. Isn't that what the kids say? You know what I'm talking about, Franklin.
IYK, YK.
If you know, you know. And since I've started working with them quickly, we've created a fellowship and an endowment at 2 HBCUs, Hampton University and HU. All right, now. We've created 2 endowments, and over the last 3 years, we've tripled the number of young black children who want to become animators, because we can't fix and find a place at the table for the next Franklin if we don't have someone who mirrors him, who looks and sounds like him, creating him. And with the money we've invested through Peanuts at Howard and Hampton, I am 100% certain we will do that. So I'm very proud of that. That is action.
That is terrific. So that's all our time. I want to make sure I thank all our panelists. Thank you for your time. I know we
Thank
made
you
you a
for
little
inviting
late on today,
us.
so I apologize. Thank you for
you.
being such a great audience. Look, we know that this is not easy stuff. Anytime you're reshaping or reimagining or rebranding, there's risk involved, but we also can't get complacent because I think we've seen enough examples of businesses that are now scrambling to try to figure out what's next when we have the opportunity to sort of build along the way. So that's my last piece, I would say.
Thank
you
you
all
for
very much.
having us.
And
What-
thank you,
for our
Rashawn.
moderator.
Yes, Rashawn Lindsay, great job.
Hello and welcome to Movie Phone.
And he might have to be the new voice. You heard it here first.